Welcome everybody to episode number 302 of Goulet Q&A, where fountain pens are still a thing. I'm Brian Goulet here from Goulet Pens, and today I'm going to be talking about if stiffer nibs are easier to control than soft nibs. Pens that I recommend with 50 plus grams of weight, the big ones. Ink recommendations for vintage pens, why pens write darker right after filling them, and then are we going to have Goulet-branded gold nibs? Plus, I'm going to be spotlighting the new BENU Pixie pens, which are pretty rad. So I'm going to show those off to you. Got a bunch of feedback, got some questions. I will let you know, I'm just a hint under the weather. Like my body's deciding am I going to make you really sick or not? I'm a little bit borderline, but I was like, you know what? I'll still get a Q&A done. I may crash after this. We'll see. But I'm not coughing a lot or anything. So we'll see how it holds up after talking for an hour continuously. But anyway, you're along for the ride with me. Also, I didn't gel my hair today. It's just kind of doing this on its own. So I was like, what the heck? Let's just show you all what it's like to tame this monster every day. Anyway, that's what I got. Let's start out with some feedback, shall we? All right, let's start off with Wendy Wander. Says, question of the week. This is a response to my question last week about, some of your first pens. So in the early 1980s, when I was 12, I purchased a Schaefer fountain pen with a medium nib at the local dime store. It came with blue ink cartridges. I really wanted to like it, but the nib was scratchy and kept leaking. It didn't help that I was writing on Mead notebook paper, which is not the best. After using the cartridges with many incidents, I threw the pen away with sadness. In 2015, I ordered a Pilot Metropolitan and a notebook from Goulet Pens and braced to be disappointed once again, but I loved it. It was a dream writing experience that I've been looking for as a teen, and I haven't looked back. Fountain pens all the way. Thank you for what you provide in the Q&A. Well, that's awesome, Wendy. Nothing makes me happier than, I don't know. I really enjoy getting people into fountain pens for the absolute first time, because then it's like a wardrobe through Narnia kind of situation. But it seems like you kind of had this too. You had some prior experience to fountain pens, but it wasn't what you were hoping it would be. But then you came back and you found what you were meant to find all along. So that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. I love hearing those kind of stories because that's, I was kind of on my own search for what I was looking for with fountain pens. Thankfully, I didn't have to come back to it after, what you said it was the 80s. So that was 40 years. Wow. Well, welcome back. Good to have you here. All right. Paul McHugh says, I was interested very much about the bouncy versus soft steel nibs. Aside from the ones you show, I would strongly recommend the Pelikan M200s with the steel nib. It is wonderfully soft and will provide line variation with very little pressure. That's a great mention. I don't think I thought of that pen because of the price point, because you're getting up into gold nib territory with the M200s. But yes, it's a very, very nice writing steel nib. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I wanted to talk about that since that was a worthy mention. From Up Daisy says, as I was watching this, my new kitten, Edith Ann, was fascinated with your hand movements. She kept trying to catch them. You have a new fan. Well, that's really adorable. I can just picture that and how adorable that must be. Yes, I gesticulate a lot when I talk. It drives my wife crazy because I will do it in the car as I'm driving. And she's like, get your hands on the wheel. I'm like, I got it. I'm good. I keep my hands on the wheel. But you know what I mean? I'm like one hand at a time, sure. But yes, I do gesticulate a lot. In fact, this goes way back. Back when I was a younger child in the 80s, the fashion of the time, there was a lot of white pants, especially for men. So my dad would wear white pants pretty often. He would always have his morning coffee. And he was right-handed, so he'd have his coffee and be driving with the left hand. And me as young 4 or 5-year-old Brian, whatever, as I was talking, I'd be flinging my hands everywhere. And not on an infrequent basis, I would hit his coffee mug and spill coffee all over his white pants, to the point we still talk about it today. And I was like, if I was 4 or 5 years old and doing that, you're wearing white pants with an open coffee mug. Isn't that really the dad's responsibility? Can you really blame the kid? That's kind of my argument. Anyway, it's endearing. He's not mad at me. Okay, what else we got here? But that's really cute. I'm going to think of your kitten. All right, Jess says, when I first tried Diamine ink, I thought it was watery and wrote in my journal about being disappointed. I had an entire 2019 ink vent Now I'm really disappointed if an ink doesn't have any shading or that watery look. Though sheen is my favorite property. Here's looking at you, Polar Glow. Well, I may or may not have a video coming out soon about heavy sheeners. I already shot it and it's being edited, so look for that one coming around the corner. Polar Glow may or may not be in there too. That's really cool. Yes, it's funny. Sometimes we do get people who are not used to writing with fountain pens, especially if you're used to like roller balls, ballpoints, things like that. You don't necessarily know that shading is like a thing. So sometimes we get people that write us and they're like, I think my pen is broken. You know, it's like not writing consistently. I'm getting all these things like and we're like, oh, really? Send us a picture or something like that. And we see it and we're like, oh, that's just shading. Like that's not only like supposed to happen. It's like a very desirable property for a lot of people. And they're like, I mean, some of them are like, ooh, gross, no. And they only want plain, flat, non-shading inks, which we guide them towards, you know, certain ones. But a lot of people are like really digging it over time. And they're like, yeah. So it sounds like that's your case, Jess. Welcome. Welcome to the shading club, the club of shady people. All right. And then Garrett says, love the podcast. You've spent a lot of time in my living room. Camera note, throw that in manual focus and it will stop searching while you record. Keeps from going from the background to you. And it's not a huge issue, but yeah, just a heads up. Well, I appreciate that, Garrett. I threw it into manual mode right now. The only problem is when I'm recording myself, I can't sit in the chair and focus it on my eyes. So what I did is I put my guitar in my seat. I tried to focus it on the guitar. So I'm hoping it'll be pretty close, you know, but it's in manual mode right now. So it should not be searching. So, you know, it's hard because I do gesticulate and sometimes I do move in and out. And so the autofocus can be helpful there, but I guess I don't really do it that much in a Q&A. So we're going to try it in manual focus mode. So let me know what y'all think. If this seems like, let me know if I seem more focused in this video. Interpret that as you will. All right, that's it for feedback right now. Let's talk about some new stuff. All right, first new thing I've got. I'm only going to touch on this because I'm going to be doing it as a spotlight later on in this video. The BENU Pixies, these cute, adorable little pocket pens. They're pretty awesome. They're like half the price of a normal BENU too. So get amped for that. But there's 11 colors, $72. So I'm going to talk about those more coming up shortly. So I won't get on too much about them now, but we have them all available. The Montblanc Innova Titanium. I actually have that one not too far away from me here too. It's a solid titanium pen and it's got gunmetal trim. It's got a carbon fiber band. It looks pretty awesome. You know, it's got a decent weight to it because it's pretty thick titanium, but it's like solid titanium all the way through with a titanium nib, which is a little flexy. So that's pretty neat. I may show that in a future video if you'd like me to. Wasn't going to show that one fully off today, but it is an interesting nib. So maybe I'll show that in the future. I'll do it in a YouTube short or something. But anyway, that one is MSRP $135. It's only $108 at Goulet Pens. For a solid titanium pen with kind of a flexy nib, might be worth a look. So yeah, give that one a look. And it's got a fine and a medium nib as an option. The fine nib might show a little bit more line variation, but I actually kind of like the medium better. It's much wetter. So I don't know, whichever one you think looks cool. I've done both of them for the Nib Nook, so you can check those out as well. Also have some new zipper pen pouches from Girologio. So 3 colors. These are like a limited edition kind of a thing. So they're special colors. We don't do a ton of like, you know, pouch type pen holders. We've got like the Punilabo and, you know, we've had maybe a few others, but, you know, these are kind of a newer thing for us, but, you know, you can fit like 20 pens in the thing and you can also fit some like samples or washi tape or whatever, you know, they're pretty good size. So anyway, they're $40. They look pretty cool. And, yeah, they're not going to be, I don't know how long they're going to be available, but, probably, I don't know, a few months, maybe most of the year. I'm not sure. So give those a look. We also have a new limited edition Visconti Homo sapiens Earth Origins called Aether. Ether. I'm not sure if it's ether. It's Aether. How do you pronounce that? I don't know. Aether. I'm just kind of splitting the difference. Aether. So it's really cool material. This is a Jonathan Brooks material. So it's like a blue, purple, red, and white kind of a swirl. It's got rose gold trim. It looks really, really nice. You know, it's up there because it's a Homo sapiens. This has got the double reservoir filler in there. So plenty of ink is what will be held in this thing. It's got their in-house 18 karat nibs, extra fine, medium, and broad. There's only 388 these worldwide, and they are numbered, individually numbered, out of 388. And yeah, $1,036. So save up. And then I got 2 inks for you. Wearing Gold inks. Pretty cool ones. First one is The Sorrow of Young Werther. This is a novel by Johann Wolfgang van Goethe. I have not read this book. I have no idea what it's about, but they made an ink named after it, which looks pretty cool. It's a multi-tonal ink. It's got like a blue to green to kind of a yellow. It's got a little bit of sheen to it. Pretty interesting. If you like inks that aren't quite sure what color they want to be, this is a great one. And then really cool ink. This is another Wearing Gold. This is called Glass Bead Game. So it's a novel by Hermann Hesse. And it is a pink to blue kind of multi-tonal with like a silver and blue shimmer in it. Basically, it kind of looks like Sailor Haha, but with shimmer. It's pretty crazy looking. It looks really wild. If you look at the pictures, you're like, that looks insane. And then you look at it in person, you're like, that also looks insane because it kind of looks crazy, but really cool looking ink. Probably not the most practical everyday ink, but I don't know, it looks pretty cool. So you can check that one out. Those are both $22 for a full bottle of those. All right, we got plenty of other new things, but that's all I got for you right now. Let's talk about some company updates and then we'll get into the questions. All right, just a couple of quick company updates here. 2 videos are going to be coming out this weekend. So if you're watching this on Friday, look out on Saturday and Sunday because we have products that are going to be available to talk about worldwide this weekend that I can't release the videos for yet. But I can tell you, look forward to something this weekend. So I'm going to have 2 different videos and I'm saying 2 different products. So yeah, I can't give you any hints as to what they are, but they're pretty neat. And I did a little intro for each of them. So look for those coming out. And then it's going to be St. Patrick's Day this coming Monday. We're open, so it's not like a major holiday for us, but it's happening. So if you don't want to get punched or pinched or whatever happens in your world, wear green, you know, whatever. It was cute. My kids, when they were young, we never like told them about leprechauns. We were like, you already got like Easter Bunny, Tooth Fairy, Santa, all these things. We don't need another thing. So we were telling them like they had this thing at like their preschool or whatever that was like, oh, they had like the leprechauns like play little tricks on them and they loved it. So they would like play little tricks and like leave traps and stuff for the leprechauns. And we were like, guys, leprechauns are like not a thing. They're like, this is made up. Sorry if I'm ruining that for anybody, but they just wanted it to happen so bad. So eventually we kind of leaned into it and put like green food coloring in the toilet and be like, oh, he peed in the toilet. I'm like, do leprechauns pee green? I don't know. It was fun. They were young. So I always associate that. They would like leave little traps or they leave little candies out to have a little trap or whatever. And I would just go and like eat the candy and leave the wrappers. And they'd be like, oh, he gave, blah, blah, blah. It's fun. Anyway, that's it. Let's go to some questions, shall we? Question number 1. Sandy Hall says, do you, Brian, agree that stiffer pens are easier to control? Use fewer finger muscles? I'm assuming you mean stiffer nibs. Are they easier to control? Yes and no. I see where you're getting at. I would say, yeah, in general, yes. So for me, it's not that like softer nibs are hard to control. Like I don't know. I don't have any scientific evidence or even anecdotal evidence about like pens with soft nibs feeling more tiring while you write with them. In fact, it might even be the opposite. I'm not totally sure. I think it just really varies by person. Some people really prefer stiffer nibs, you know, maybe a harder hand, or maybe they, you know, just hold it at such an angle where a soft nib is not, you know, as desirable for them or whatever. They just don't like that bouncy feel. I don't know. There's a lot of different reasons why somebody could not want a softer, bouncier nib. But I don't know that it like makes a significant difference in terms of like the muscles in your hand and them getting tired and stuff. I think basically if you're using a fountain pen versus over whatever other writing instrument, you're in a lot better shape in terms of your hand. So I don't know if we need to like split hairs as to which fountain pen might be more fatiguing than another. I think it has more probably to do with the weight of the pen. If you have a really heavy pen in your hand, that's going to feel harder to write. So maybe if all else equal and you have 2 identical pens, one's with a soft nib, one's not, it'd be interesting to see if you notice a difference over a long period of time, but that is probably going to vary a lot by person. But what I will say is that people that are newer to fountain pens generally will find, you know, steel nib pens or just stiffer nib pens in general a little easier to write with. And that's because most people press too hard on their pens, which makes sense because if you're coming from ballpoints, roller balls, things like that, they work by friction. A lot of times they're sitting in a cup like this for, a long period of time, not getting used, or it's left in a car or whatever. And you got to like bear down and kind of get the thing going. Fountain pens are not that way. So a lot of times people are pushing too hard on their fountain pens when they first get into them, at least. So if you have a really soft nib, that can get even more frustrating. You can even ruin the nib if you're really pressing too hard. So I generally, recommend people get stiffer nibs when they first start. And then once you really get used to it, once you get used to having it in the right position in your hand, have a consistent angle, and you really kind of get used to writing in a more relaxed position, you're not pressing down as hard. Like most people, they'll have a pen, and when they're first getting into fountain pens, they're used to they hold it like this and like bear down, and they're like, I gotta force this pen to work. It's like, no, fountain pens are cool. Like they'll work with you. Just chill. So it's like you can lean it back a little bit, just kind of have your hand relaxed. It's kind of like sit it in there, touch it down onto the paper, and it basically should write under its own weight. Once you kind of get used to that, then you're like, oh, I can like chill a little bit here. I don't have to like, like force this pen into submission and make it write. It wants to write. That's its life. That's what it wants to do. You just got to kind of work with it, So I think it's like anything else. It's like when you start on a new instrument, you don't buy a really nice high-end instrument that's like very delicate and stuff like that, because the nicer aspects of what it can do, you're not going to appreciate, and you're going to kind of beat it up, right? So like you start out with something that's stiffer, all that, until you can like finally get used to it, relax. Then if you want to get into softer nibs, you can. And then by that point, I would say you probably have a more relaxed writing position anyway. And so whether or not you use a steel nib, like a stiffer nib or a softer nib, probably isn't going to make a world of difference to you. I would say if you're using a full flex nib, that would make a difference, because then you're having to write a lot slower. It's a lot more meticulous. So, a normal soft nib that just has a little bit of bounce to it, it probably doesn't make an appreciable difference, or at least I don't notice in terms of like the effort used to write it. If you're writing with a full-on flex nib, that is more tiring. That is more taxing, just because of the intentionality it takes, and you're kind of writing almost in like 3 dimensions now instead of 2. With the flexing up and down, and it really does require some different hand motions. So yeah, so the answer there is kind of a blend, right? Yes and no. But I don't know how much it has to do with the finger muscles necessarily, but yeah. So anyway, just some little nuances there, but you're more or less on the right track. Next question, Anders Sicker says, what fountain pens would you recommend that have more weight to them? Around 50 grams is the area that I'm thinking. I have a Montblanc JFK ballpoint and just love the weight and how little force it takes to write. 50 grams, that's hardy. That's a hardy pen. There's not, the nice thing is we have a filter on our website for overall weight, where you can literally see by like 10 gram increments, all the pens that we have that fit under that classification, because we've weighed every cap, body, and then have the total weight as well for every pen that we carry, because that's an extra thing that we do. Any new pen that we get, we got to run it through its paces, do all these measurements and ink capacity, all that stuff. That's not provided to us by the manufacturer. We do all that in-house. So that's why I brag on this feature, is because we had to get custom development on our site to be able to show this filter. So yeah, you can just filter right hand, just go to like the view all fountain pens page, and you can just look at the side overall weight, and it's got like 10 gram increments, all the different weights. So in a way, it was kind of easy for me. I could just go on there and like, just select everything over 50 grams. But out of that, I pulled out some that I could recommend and maybe talk about a little bit. I don't have any specific familiarity with the JFK ballpoint. Granted, it is a ballpoint. So kind of what I was just talking about, you're not going to need probably as much weight, on a fountain pen, but still, you asked, so I'm answering. 50 grams is pretty substantial, I will say, overall in the fountain pen scheme of things. But that's cool because there's some good choices. So first that I had that actually kind of surprised me was the Monteverde Ritma. Very affordable pen. It is a solid metal pen. I didn't realize that it was 50 grams, honestly, because it doesn't feel as heavy in my hand. I don't know why. It is 50 grams, but Very popular pen. A lot of people use it. It's very easy to use unposted as well. So if you want to save a little bit of weight, you certainly can. So that's one. That's right around 50 grams. Another one, the Conklin Duragraph in smoky purple PVD. So this is, normally the Duragraph is a mostly resin pen, but this one is all metal because it's got that smoky purple PVD coating on it. So that one is a little heavier. It's at 53 grams. Normally the Duragraph is like half that. So that one's got a bit of heft to it as well. And that one, if you don't use it posted, it substantially cuts down on the weight. So that one you could do that. Let's see here. We have the Kaweco. The Kaweco Supra in either brass or fire blue. I don't know if we have the fire blue anymore, but the fire blue is pretty heavy too. But the Kaweco Supra brass, that thing is a honker. That is about 52 grams. Nice thing about that one is if you want to save some weight, you can take out like the middle section of it or just use it unposted. You have lots of different options to sort of like dial in your weight on that pen. You know, it's nice. Takes a full-size converter, number 6 size nib, so it's a little departure from the normal Kaweco pens. So yeah, that one's pretty cool. Very heavy. Diplomat has some pretty heavy options. We have the Diplomat Aero in the oxide brass or flame. So these are both, you know, solid. Normally the Aero is made out of aluminum, so it's a little bit lighter. You know, still metal pen. It's pretty chunky pen, but the aluminum keeps it pretty light. But on the flame, you know, that's raw steel that they have, and then they flame the steel. That's how they get that effect. That is 69 grams. You know, that's with the cap and everything. So unposted, it would be lighter than that. And then the Aero Oxide Brass, because brass is heavier than steel, that sucker is 77 grams. So it's a chunker. And then we have some Viscontis here. So Visconti's got some pretty beefy pens. The least beefy of the ones I'm going to mention here is the Opera Master. It's a pretty big pen. That one's right around 50 grams. It's got a pretty substantial cap too, and it's got a long body. So I normally don't post mine when I write with it because it becomes pretty back-weighted. So I don't know, maybe that one be all right for you, maybe not. It's a pretty expensive pen too. You're pushing $1,000 for those pens. But what the heck? I'm just going off the rails here towards the end. The Visconti Il Magnifico, super rad looking pen. They've done, you know, a different color every like year or two. So this one they have right now, it's a pen that's made of sterling silver and marble, like actual marble. So it's pretty heavy. This is one that I cannot write with for extended periods of time because it really feels pretty heavy in my hand. Like I have pretty big hands and I don't get tired very much with most pens, but the Il Magnifico is one where I'm like, I think I might be finding my limit here. Anyway, gorgeous looking pen. That thing is 82 grams. But all of these pale in comparison to the heaviest pen that we currently carry. It is a limited edition, but this is Visconti Dreaming Starry Night. Gorgeous looking pen. It's a $5,000 pen, so it better weigh a lot because there should be a lot to it. That pen is 137 grams. That is crazy. That is so crazy heavy. I don't know how anybody writes with it, to be honest with you. I could write like my signature with it, but it's really more of a collectible kind of display pen. Probably not that many people are daily writing with their Dreaming Starry Night, but hey, to each their own. You certainly could. So if you want the absolute heaviest pen you can get, that's a good one. And I left one off of here. I didn't actually, now that I think about it, I didn't put the Jinhao Dragon on here. That pen is kind of crazy. I need to mention it now because I think it's also pretty darn heavy. Let me check it out what it is real quick. It's a pretty uncomfortable pen to write with, to be honest with you. But it's $30, so it's pretty decent. Oh, that's 99 grams. Okay, so it is the second heaviest pen on the list. Well, Jinhao Dragon, there you go. That is also an option if you want an absurdly heavy pen. So yeah, you got some good options there. You know, a nice range of prices. You know, my leanings for you would be to try something like the Ritma or the Duragraph maybe, and see how you like those before you invest in something, you know, much heavier. But the Diplomats would also be nice. Kaweco is good too. Yeah, really, I like everything that I mentioned. That's why I mentioned them. So, all right, I think that's all I have about to say. That's all I have to say about that. Let's move along. All right, next question. This is from Fig Mentor. Congrats on all this success. I love you guys. Well, thank you very much. 2 questions for you. I inherited a bunch of my father's and grandfather's fountain pens, a Cross Townsend from 81, 2 Pelikan M200s from the West Germany days, and a 1960s era Montblanc. All are in wonderful and working order. That's pretty cool. Any guidance on what inks to use or avoid with these? Is there any additional considerations I should keep in mind? I will be first to say I'm not a huge vintage pen guy. So I will not have like the end all be all advice for you. First thing though is that's really cool that you can use those pens. Like I'm glad they're in good working order. Seems like they should be pretty solid, especially, with Pelikan, they still make those pens. So I would imagine if there was any situation where you needed to, repair it or whatever, that they probably still could service it. Cross, I doubt. Cross has changed a lot over the years. They're not the same company that they were back in the 80s. And Montblanc, I have no idea what they're up to because I don't do anything with them. But, the 60s was a long time ago, but it's a really popular brand. So there's probably a lot of people that could service Montblancs. So that's one thing. Any really old pen like that, the more you use it, the more likely it is to, have parts that wear out, or you might drop it or break it or whatever, just stuff happens with pens. So it's a calculated risk, with anything that you use. Every ink you put in there, every time you clean it, everything that you do, is using the pen, causing it some degree of That might be the first time I've sneezed on camera. I remember that being a thing back in the Pencast. That one snuck up on me a little bit. Anyway, that's my shotgun sneeze, as it's called. Keep that in. Let's keep that in. Anyway, whew. Where was I? That just jolted the thoughts right out of my head. Servicing pens. Yeah. So yeah, that's one consideration to have. Any vintage pen that you have. Can you get replacement parts for it? Do you know anybody who can do any repairs? If you should have anything happen to it that you want to, whatever. Again, is it particularly sentimental? Is it particularly, valuable or anything like that? Maybe financially it's not valuable, but it's an irreplaceable pen because it came from, a relative. That all should come into consideration when how much you're using your pens and where you use them. So I would say if the pens are like this, they're kind of special, I would keep them, maybe as desk pens. I would just use conventional inks in them. I wouldn't use anything, with really wild properties. No shimmer inks, no high sheening inks, nothing iron gall, no pigmented, no waterproof inks, like any of that kind of stuff. I would use just pretty straight up normal inks. Nothing multitonal, anything that's got like any kind of crazy properties to it. I would just use, plain conventional inks, ideally pH neutral inks if you can get them. Not every manufacturer says if there's pH neutral or not. But then really it's just a matter too of like maintaining and servicing them. So, not leaving ink to dry out in them for a long period of time. Just if you're going to use them, that's cool. Use them. Just keep them maintained and cleaned regularly. And then, if you're not going to use them for a little while, clean them out. Don't leave the ink sitting in there for a long time, because that's usually what messes up a lot of vintage pens is people don't clean them out the last time they go to use them. They shove them in a drawer somewhere, and then the ink dries up and it becomes this like hardened, almost like glue that is like stuck inside the pen. It has to be kind of rehabbed. And if the pen is all kind of like gummed up and stuck, with old dried up ink in there, that's when you can like say a pen like the M200, right? So you've got a piston in that pen. So that's where if you're got ink that's all dried up in there and you try to work that piston eventually, that's where it can break, is because the thing is kind of stuck in there and you're forcing it more than it was intended, right? So that would be the biggest thing is, if they are in good working order, just keep them in good working order. Let's see here. What else have I got? Ink recommendations. So I kind of mentioned a few things about inks already. I would just kind of as a general rule with pens that you're not quite sure about, you want to kind of play it safe. Generally speaking, it's pretty good to go with inks that come from a pen manufacturer because they're warrantying their pens. They want to warranty their pens and say like, oh, you should use our inks because that's what they're testing their pens with, right? So that's usually you're going to not have as wild a properties if you have inks that come from a pen manufacturer. So anything like Pelikan, Pilot, LAMY, Sailor, stuff like that. Sailor does have some that get a little bit outside. your conventional stuff, but kind of just your normal straight up Sailor inks are pretty safe. And most like the Ink Studios and stuff, they're pretty conventional. So yeah, I would think that you could enjoy a lot of different inks. When you get to like some of the boutique brands, your Diamine and Noodlers and Robert Oster and other things like Waringle and stuff like that, you can get to some more interesting properties and stuff like that, which are certainly fun. But I personally don't like to use the fun, more experimental inks in my like vintage, hard to replace pens. That's just me. Usually they're harder to clean too, so I don't enjoy cleaning high maintenance inks out of those pens. So I will kind of like find an ink that I like, that I know is pretty reliable. Jacques Herbin inks are pretty good. They don't even use like biocides in there. They're like very natural, kind of au natural. So they have pretty safe inks as well. So I would go with just kind of straight laced inks. In any of these. So yeah, those are my recommendations. Pilot Roshizuku, I'm a big fan of that. So yeah, any of those should work pretty well. But yeah, enjoy those pens. That sounds awesome. I don't have any that was passed down to me because I don't have any fountain pens in my lineage. My parents remembered using them in school way back in the day, but my dad remembers like, flicking them onto other students, onto his friends and stuff like that. But of course I would never do that. Anyway, I'm sure none of y'all would either. All right, Jordan Kyrios says, hello, Brian. Very nice Q&A. Well, thank you. Question. When I write the first lines with my pen, the ink seems darker than when I reach the middle of the page. I use a Pelikan 4001 dark green ink. So pretty conventional ink. That would be a good one to use in your grandfather's pens there, Fig Mentor. All right. Why does this happen? Accumulated ink on the feed or whatever. In addition, when the pen is uncapped for a few seconds, the ink becomes darker again, but the nib does not feel drier. I use a LAMY Joy. I don't know if all fountain pens behave that way or if it's something specific with my pen. Okay, interesting. So, Pelikan 4001, pretty conventional ink. If anything, I think Pelikan's 4001 series ink, that's their like non-Edelstein ink. I find it to be pretty dry writing most of the time. So, dry feeling at least on the page. So it's not like gushing out of the thing. So yeah, I think definitely there's a distinct possibility that it could come from a fresh filling. The feed is nice and saturated and, that's when it's going to seem darker. Also the LAMY Joy, you have assuming you haven't swapped the nib out of there, you're going to have a calligraphy nib on there. So I think you can get it in a 1.5, 1.1, 1.5, or 1.9. I know they sell those nibs. I don't remember if the Joy comes with all those nib options. Maybe it just comes with the 1.1. I know they've done some with the 1.5s, like the white ones and stuff. I don't know. I don't know exactly which pen you have, but you have the option, I guess, to put whatever calligraphy nib on there you like. So either way, you get that kind of stub nib. That could also impact the writing just a little bit because it's a bigger surface area. Might have a little bit more ink out of there, but a lot of it's going to have to do with the feed and how much ink is charged up in the feed. If you're freshly filling the pen, that's going to write a little wetter than, or if the pen's been sitting there for a while, especially have it like nibbed down. So gravity's kind of working with it to keep the ink, more like loaded into the feed, could write a little wetter when you first pick it up, as opposed to later on, if you're writing with it, kind of continuously for a bunch, by, like you said, kind of like halfway down the page. At that point, depending on your writing speed, you may have kind of used up because of the feed and those fins and stuff in the feed, which you can't really see the fins in the feed on a LAMY because they're kind of hidden, but they are in there. They're in the grip. Those are going to load up with ink and act like a reservoir. So it's like if you're writing, quickly and it needs to draw more ink than is naturally kind of flowing down from the ink reservoir, it's got that ink kind of loaded up and ready to go. But if you get to the point where you've used up all that and you're writing a little faster than maybe the pen has normally wanted to keep up, then it's going to put a little less ink down, and the color is going to seem a little less dark. Now you can always, if it's a converter pen, you can always just unscrew that converter a little bit, kind of force more ink down into the feed, get it writing wetter again, kind of emulates when it's just been filled. You'll go through it quicker that way, but it'll look darker and cooler. So, I do that sometimes if I have a pen normally if I have a pen that's like absurdly dry and I really don't like how dry it is. Or if I'm using like a flex pen or something like that and I'm really demanding a lot of it, That's not the case here with your Joy. What's confused me though a little bit is you're not having the cap on it, and then it doesn't feel like it writes drier, but the ink becomes darker again in just a few seconds. I don't know why that would be. There's nothing, I think, physically that should matter there necessarily, unless you, I don't know, if you have a cartridge or a converter that's not quite seated all the way, or has a leak or has a crack or something like that. It could be that, it's letting a little more ink down than it normally would. That's the only thing that I can kind of think of, which could be a unique situation to your pen, but that's pretty rare. It doesn't happen all the time, especially with LAMY. Like, their converters are pretty chunky, pretty solid. And those pens are pretty sturdy too. So I wouldn't anticipate that maybe you've got an issue there. But that can happen if you have, especially if you're like refilling a cartridge a lot. They're disposable cartridges. They're not meant to last forever. So at some point, especially if you're like me, when I refill a cartridge and I want to get it flowing, I'll squeeze the cartridge to get ink forced down into the pen. If you're doing that a lot, then you can eventually wear down that plastic and crack the converter. It might just be kind of like a hairline crack, but basically if you have any kind of crack or any kind of leak anywhere in the system there, fountain pens are essentially a controlled leak. So if you have extra air in there, it's sort of like if you're holding the end of a straw, and you've got like your liquid or your drink or whatever in there, and then you let go of the end of the straw and everything just kind of falls out. It's sort of like that. It's like if you have extra air that's allowed to go into your pen somewhere, more ink will flow out. It could be that's just like a little bit, not having enough to like drip out of the pen, but it could just be like a lot of it's collecting in the feed, and then if it sits there for a few seconds, it could get a little darker. I don't really know. That's interesting. I'm not 100% sure what would be causing that issue. It must just be a very wet pen. So anyway, that's a little bit about your pen. So it's definitely totally normal for it to start writing darker and then for it to lighten up, especially if you're writing at a pretty good click. But it may also be the ink too. Not all ink, that ink is a little bit more of a drier ink. It could be that, unless the feed is kind of flooded, it's going to naturally write a little drier anyway. And it could be that if you use a different ink in there, that you may not see these properties, kind of happening at all. So I don't know. Interesting. But thanks for the question. All right, last question for the week here. We got from Reed Jacobs, who says, any chance you'll sell Goulet-branded 14 or 18 karat gold nibs? We could, but they would be very expensive. That's the problem. Gold is expensive. Literally more expensive now than ever. And when we had quoted out doing these a while ago, I think this was like pre-COVID, it was really expensive already. It was really expensive. So the cost was going to end up being something like $150 minimum of the end up selling price. And that's not with us taking very much of a cut of that. They're just really expensive for us. So it would be very expensive for you all. So it's just never felt worth it, for $150+ plus the quantities we have to buy them is kind of ridiculous too. So it just hasn't really made sense for us to do them. And they don't fit that many pens. Like, it used to fit a lot more pens, it does fit pens like Edison's and stuff like that. But, I'm fine with steel nibs and people swapping them onto their, different pens. That's pretty low stakes, but you wouldn't want to pay $150 or $200 for a gold nib and then have to swap it yourself on some pen that you're not quite sure if it fits or not or whatever. It's just like, that gets a little tough. So it's possible we could do it, but the pricing is pretty out of whack and it only fits specific size pens. And we did have experiences before where we've sold Edison pens for quite a while. And Edison, their nibs are Yovo. So like their gold nibs would be very similar to the ones that we would offer. So I know they would be good gold nibs, and they're very wet. But we've done things where we've sold, Edison pens with steel nibs on them and offered a gold nib upgrade, which is like doubles the price of the pen, basically. Very few people have taken us up on that offer in the past. So it's pretty niche. But if that is something you're interested in, I don't know, let me know. It's like, like most things in the world, you can make anything happen if you have enough money. But would there be enough interest in that for it to make sense for us to stock all of those and carry them and stuff like that? And then it's like, do you get just yellow gold? Do you get rhodium plated? And stuff like that, you know, and black and all that. It gets tough to stock all those with different nib sizes and stuff like that. So I don't know. I'm not rushing to go and set those up, but it's potentially an option. I don't know. That's a quick and easy answer for you there. Okay, so now I want to show you these BENU Pixies because they look pretty rad. So I'm going to flip on my other camera and we're going to check these cool little dudes out. All right, look at all these little buggers. Now they're pretty small. Like you can see my hands, granted I have big hands, but just to give you an idea, you know, here's a LAMY Safari and here it is next to a Safari. So definitely a pocket pen. You know, the overall length of these suckers is going to be 3.6 inches approximately. Pretty short, but it's cool. When you post them, they do get longer because they post pretty high up and they become fairly usable. Like even in my big hand, it fits. It fits pretty well. In fact, you know, I have a Pilot Metropolitan here, which, you know, if you have the pens closed, it's quite a bit smaller, but when you open it, you know, if you post it, the Pilot's going to be longer, of course. But if you post the BENU and you leave Metropolitan unposted, they're pretty close. They're pretty close. And even the grip diameter and everything is actually pretty darn close. Even similar shape now that I look at it. So yeah, if you like writing with a Metropolitan, this would be pretty close. Obviously, it's a little thicker up here at the cap, but I don't know. That feels pretty good actually on my hand. There's no sharp edges or anything like that. So it's very comfortable. Now your hand is on the threads here. If that bothers you, you know, it might be a thing. It's a long enough, I mean, literally it's like the Metropolitan. I mean, very similar kind of dimensions there. So if you don't have a problem with the Metropolitan, and the edges on the Metropolitan are actually a little sharper than what you have with these threads. It feels a little more gradual. I don't notice it at all because I don't know, I'm playing a lot more guitar and bass and stuff like that. My fingers are getting all calloused. So I don't really care about threads and texture as much anymore. So that's just me. But yeah, pretty cool little pens. Now I will say these are small, right? They're short. So the biggest compromise you're going to have with these is that you're not going to be able to fit a converter in here, right? Now they're standard international, which is cool, right? So you get your standard international cartridge that comes with it. And one thought you might have is like, what about a mini converter? Would that work? Well, I have two different mini converters. I got the Monteverde one, which is right here. And then I've got the Kaweco one. So I'll show you what happens when you throw the Monteverde one on here. So first off, when I go to put it on, you can see it's stopping me right there. But say I put it on all the way and screw it down. Well, the problem with that is it's pushing the rod down on the converter. And you only get about that much ink capacity, which is like barely more than empty. So not very useful. The Kaweco mini converter is slightly better because it's a teensy-weensy bit shorter, but you still run into the same problem. Now, the only converter that does reliably work in here, see this one is even like 2/3 pushed down. Not super practical. So refilling your cartridge is going to be the way to go. The only other one is a Kaweco foldable converter, which unfortunately I don't have one because we accidentally oversold one and we have not gotten restocked. We've been out of them forever. And so I gave mine up for a loving customer. But then I don't have one to show you right now. So once we get restocked, I'll have them again. I can use them for videos again. But the way that converter works is essentially like this converter here, except the rod up here, you know, folds in half kind of in the middle and allows you to, you know, close up a pen. So that one does work in here, but it's also a reduced capacity even from what this is. So it's not a huge amount of ink. Best option is going to go to refilling a standard international cartridge, or you can eyedropper fill these too. And you get about twice the ink as you do if you're just using a cartridge. So if you use a cartridge, you get about 1 milliliter of ink between the cartridge and what's in the feed. You know, so if the pen's completely dried out, then I guess you'll get less than a mil. But if you eyedropper fill it, you're getting 2 mil. So that's pretty decent. That's a pretty decent volume of ink. So it kind of depends on how you use it. If it's a pocket pen, maybe that weirds you out. You know, you could put an O-ring on here, one of those little preppy O-rings that we have, or you get a little silicone grease. That would help a lot. The threads are pretty fine, so I feel pretty good, even if you just did silicone grease. And then lock that thing down, I don't think you would have any leaking issues. It's a completely solid body. So I think you'd be fine to eyedropper convert this. But it's a calculated risk on your part. So nib options, we have these in an extra fine, fine, and medium across all sizes. And yeah, these pens are $72. And what I really like about a couple of these pens, I'm going to show you each color, but what I really like is some of them, like this Aqua Glow here, it has some translucence in the cap and you can see the nib through it, which is awesome. I love that look. And you don't get that on very many BENUs. I'm trying to think of another BENU that has a translucent cap like that, and I'm failing to recall. I mean, you sort of get that a little bit with Earl Grey, but it's not very common overall. So this is the first color. This is Aqua Glow. So really nice. It's like a silver going to a translucent aqua with shimmer in it. Very BENU. There's clipless pens, obviously, and they will do an okay job of not rolling away. it does have this little indentation here. It doesn't really it's not like a flat part like it would, I don't know, how would it work? It's enough of a shape that, I'm not sure it would stop like a cup that's like really rolling, but it might be enough to just kind of keep it in place a little bit. It takes 3 rotations to close it and open it. So that's a thing. I would probably prefer it if it was a little bit less, maybe not quite 3. Yeah, so if you look at the BENU there and kind of hold it, pinch it in place, there's 1 rotation, 2, yeah, right about 3. So I wouldn't call it like a quick draw type of thing, but I think it works really well. And you wouldn't want this thing coming out like in your pocket because it is a pocket pen, but you're gonna have to like toss this thing in your pocket, right? There's no clip or anything, so it's gonna get jostled. Anyway, that's Aqua Glow. Looks really good. This one is Aurora Gold. This looks really cool. So it's a dual tone here, and you get a lot of swirliness, a lot of depth in there. You get your chunky glitter like BENU does. Not so much translucent here in the top, but what you get is it's got this like shimmer in it that's like a multi-tonal kind of color shifting thing. So it's a nice turquoise kind of teal color, but it definitely has like a bluish purple kind of shine to it. I don't know how well that comes across. It's kind of hard to capture, but it's there. Trust me. All right, next one I've got here. This is Coffee Brown. This one's a little more consistent through and through, but it's a nice brown. It's got some like kind of tighter swirls in this. And then it's got some like copper bronze looking, pieces of glitter in there that are a little more consistent kind of throughout the thing. Looks pretty cool. Really good looking brown pen, if that's your thing. Same grip on that. This one's got a yellow gold nib, or a steel nib, but it's yellow gold plated. The nibs, talk about those for a second. These are number 5 size nibs. These are Schmidt nibs. So these come out of Germany. They write pretty comparable to like Bach and Jovo, the number 5 size nibs. I find them to be pretty reliable. If you have any of the other BENU pens that have the smaller nibs on them, it's going to be the same as those. This pen I like a lot. This one is Emerald Sea. Really, really nice looking blue color with some decent shine to it. And then that blue kind of blends into a beautiful kind of teal color that also has a little bit of shine to it. So similar, maybe not identical, but similar to what you have here on the Aurora Gold. So yeah, but obviously very different body. So that is pretty good. This one looks kind of similar to the Coffee Brown. This is Honey Bronze. So the brown is a little bit darker on here, but you get this really cool kind of amber where you can really see the nib in there. To me, this just screams Jurassic Park, where that mosquito is inside the amber that the guy had on his cane. That's what I immediately think of. Those were formative years for me when that movie came out. Very, very cool looking. I'm not as much in love with the overall color scheme of this pen, but the fact that you can see the nib so clearly through here, this one might be my favorite. I'm not sure. It's pretty close, but that's a rad looking pen, the Honey Bronze. This next one is Icy Violet, and this is cool. You don't see a lot of pens in this color combination. Looks really nice. So you get like a pure white here on the body. Well, it's like a white and a kind of a silvery mix here on the body and in the grip. But then it's got, you know, very much this kind of pink, translucent pink. A little bit of that pink kind of bleeds over into the white. So it feels like it's a little more of an ombre type of effect that it ends up getting, which is really nice and looks super cool. Next one we've got is Plum Cream. So this one, no translucence in the cap at all. It's a very solid color. That's the cream. But you get much more intense swirls in here. I really like this. You see this on a lot of like Brooks resins and stuff. And then you got some really dark, you know, kind of plum color with some very small shimmer down in there. This one looks really good. And then the grip on that one is going to match the body. I think the grip matches the body on all these. I'm not sure. Let's see here. I skipped the honey bronze. Yeah, that one's brown. So grip is going to be similar. Okay, next one here. This is royal blue. So if you just straight up like the blue, if you really like the blue that's on the Emerald Sea, it's very similar to that, except this is blue through and through, which you would think that would be my favorite. And I'm not going to lie, I do like it a lot. But I'm a sucker for two-tone as well and multi-tonal stuff. So that's a really nice looking color. It's got like a hint of a lighter blue in there too. So it's not just pure blue. It's got some more interesting things going on there. All right, next one. This is the most boring one of the bunch in my opinion. Smoky black. Never hurts to just have a more conventional kind of straight up black pen, but it's nice. It's like a more like a graphite kind of color. So it does have a little bit of shimmer to it, but this is going to be the quietest one of the bunch. This one's got gold trim on it. So that's that one. Now this one, Stardust Pink. Wow, this one is probably the loudest of all of them, but it looks pretty cool. Very 90s. Nice pink. There's a very hot pink, unapologetic. I don't know why on some of these they did gold imprinting, but it's silver trim in there. I don't know why they did that. Just an aesthetic choice of theirs, I guess. They're not all gold in the middle there. Some of them are silver, but I don't know why they did some of them. But anyway, blue's nice looking, nice lighter blue, and then kind of more of a hard shift over into the pink there. And then last but not least, we have Twilight Lagoon. This one I like a lot because it's got a lot of translucence in the cap, so you can see the nib, but then the light catches it right, and you can see it's got the iridescent kind of, you know, shimmer in there. But because it's so translucent, that iridescent shimmer, it's like very three-dimensional. It's almost like there's like layers of it that you can kind of see through. So it looks like that shimmer, like that iridescent color is kind of like suspended within the material. It just has this really cool effect. The camera's kind of capturing it, but it looks even cooler in person. It looks, I don't know, as you move this pen around, you can really see the swirls of iridescence moving around inside of there. It's really cool. Let me see if I can get this one a little closer up so you can actually like see more close up what's going on. There you go. Of course, I got these bright lights and everything. Let's see. Yeah, see that as I shift it, you can see it's like a little more nib, but then it shifts a little bit and that color of the iridescence really comes up and kind of obscures it. It's almost like a hologram. Isn't that cool? So I don't know. I think that's pretty awesome. This might be my favorite pen. If I had this, like this in the cap with a blue on the bottom, that would be cool. Like this pretty much, but with this translucence. Yeah, that'd be awesome. But anyway, these are really cool pens. Good job, BENU. I think these are awesome. I'm very curious, especially if you also haven't used BENU before. This is a nice affordable way to get into BENU. Now, granted, with other BENUs, you're getting a much bigger pen, you're getting a bigger nib, you know, ink converters and stuff like that. But this is a decent way to kind of ease into it and get to use some cool, you know, get to use some pens that really look like the build quality is really good. Their fit and finish is great. And you just can't get these types of resins on like an injection molded plastic like you typically would get in pens kind of more in this price range. So I think this is really cool that BENU's got these. If you're not that interested in any in particular, or you're not going to get it or whatever, I would at least like to know which colors that you really like, because there are so many choices. So let me know what stands out. I'd love to hear it in the comments. But you can pick all these up at Goulet Pens right now. All right, let's see here. Brian's adventures. Let's talk about what I've been up to in the last week. Like I mentioned, feel like I could be approaching sickness. Rachel was sick last week. I'm starting to feel sick, so I'm thinking maybe there's a correlation there. I don't know. I'm no science genius, but I know that's sometimes how it works. So we'll see how that goes. But I had my in-laws visit this past weekend. That was cool. I'm in good relations with them. Had a really nice time with them. My father-in-law and I had started wood turning a bowl. This is literally just out of a piece of maple that was like junk wood that I gotten from a friend of mine. It's a pretty big piece of maple. It was like, about this big or so. So we ended up making a bowl that's probably about 12, 14 inches in diameter, which I've never made a bowl that size. Never turned a bowl that size before. So that was pretty cool. And it's sometimes when I'm doing wood turning, especially from when it's like a undried piece of wood, half the time I throw it on there, start turning it down, and then I try to let it dry out a little bit, and the thing splits and cracks and becomes kind of unusable. This is how it goes sometimes, but that seems to have happened to me a lot. But this bowl was like perfect. It was in great shape, no splits or cracks. I guess because maple's a very stable wood. But it looked cool. It had a lot of figure to it and all that. So we started on that at Christmas time. I left it on my lathe for like 3 months now. And I guess little over 2 months. But yeah, we just finished up this past weekend. So that's pretty cool. Nice to get a project actually done, because that doesn't always happen. So that was kind of nice. And then I'm also sort of in the middle of a project. My son wants to paint his room. He's 15, still has like, the multicolor, like primary colors on the ceiling fan blades, like I call them clown colors. It's like red, yellow, blue, green, white, and it's just like, okay, he's growing up a little bit more. We can kind of get rid of the kid's fan, so I painted those fan blades. The fan itself is fine. So I just painted the blades. And he's picking out new colors for his room, because it's like literally like the plain beige, the move-in beige, as we call it, that we never painted since we moved into the house 13 years ago. So yeah, it's about time. So he's picking out some colors. I had no input. I was like, just whatever you want, we'll paint it. So I was like trying to give him some guidance, like, if you paint really dark color, it's going to make the room feel smaller and stuff like that. But he, whatever, he's 15. So we picked 3 different blues. I think we're going to end up going with like a sky blue type of a color. So that should be pretty good. Not as dark as like what you have here. I had no input into that decision. He on his own picked out 3 blues, and I was like, okay, I don't mind painting blue. So, we're going to go with that probably soon. So we went through and did all the patching, and because he had posters and he had that like sticky tack stuff that you use for posters. He had a lot of he's big into Lego. So he had a lot of like the cardboard boxes, that have the picture of the Lego kit. We would cut out those and put those up on his wall and stuff like that. Those are heavy, so that, we needed like that goopy blue sticky junk, for poster putty or whatever it's called. And of course, when you leave that on for like a decade, it doesn't want to come off the wall very easily. So we had to scrape all that stuff off and then sand it. And then, it's a whole thing. So he's been hanging with me, he's been right along there, the whole project with me so far. So we at the point where we've got the sample colors painted. We got like 3 different samples. And I'm like, if it comes to painting something in the house, I will get as many samples as we need and paint those on the wall, because I do not want to have to repaint the entire room multiple times. I want to make sure that we're happy with the samples, and we've never regretted that. So, just like that's part of the inspiration for ink samples, is like you get a sample and you get a pretty good taste for what it's going to be like in the full thing. So yeah, we're doing that whole thing. So it just stinks, because like when they painted the house previously, they painted all the ceilings to match the walls. So every room that I'm repainting now, I have to paint the ceiling as well. So I'm just painting all the ceilings white. Which is a little fun little fact. If you paint the ceiling a lighter color than your walls, it makes the room seem like larger. Kind of lifts up the room a little bit. But yeah, it does mean that if I would not paint the ceiling, that it would be this like beige color. And then there would be like this blue on the wall. It would probably be okay, but it would look kind of weird. So I'm going to be painting. So we've got to like prime the whole thing. We've got to paint the ceiling and then do all the stuff. So we've really prepped everything and washed all the walls and all that stuff. Now it's pretty much just going to be priming and painting. So Yeah, that's been a fun little at-home project, but it's cool getting to like work with my son on that and kind of teach him like how to hold the paintbrush and how to do all the stuff, so that's pretty cool. Let's see here. What else? Spending a lot of time playing my instruments. That's like my go-to thing that I really enjoy doing in my downtime. I play plenty of them now and I switch between them all. So that's been cool. I did some bari sax this weekend. I did, electric guitar, acoustic guitar, bass, really almost all the instruments I have. And then also have a set of electronic drums, like an electric drum kit. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that, but I'm trying to do that more because I've always wanted to learn, and why not? I don't have enough going on in my life. But no, it's kind of cool. It's definitely takes a lot of coordination, but I've been picking up on it a little easier than I would have thought. So we'll see. I know I still owe you all some bari sax playing, which I will. I may have something in the future around that. We'll see. And then last thing of note is I'm super pumped because I can't shut up about Severance. Rachel is now caught up and watching it with me. I finally wore her down. It's just like after the 7th episode, I was like, Rachel, just come on. You gotta hang with me on this. Like, it's too good. So she's binged it with me. I of course rewatched the whole 2nd season, which I've now seen like 3 times basically. And I'll probably watch it more. But now she's caught up. So we just watched episode 8. Which I'm very excited about. There's two more in this season, and then we're going to get a prolonged period of time with nothing more. It's going to be hard, but I've heard the finale is going to be pretty big, so pretty interesting. Anyway, so that's pretty fun. So yeah, we're watching that together, and then that's pretty much it in my life. Yeah, I'll wrap this thing up. Just thank you for watching. Leave me some feedback. Ask me more questions. I want to keep them coming. Check out Goulet-pens.com for ink, pen, and paper needs. Subscribe to all our channels and whatnot. And I do have a fun fact for you. My fun fact, so I was trying to look up, I was curious if there was a world record for fastest handwriting. And I found some like unofficial things. There's no Guinness World Record for fastest handwriting. There's some other ones, but I was like, I don't know if these are legit or not. But I did find some fun information about like averages. So the average adult can handwrite between 5 and 20 words per minute. So around 26 to 113 letters, with the average being about 13 words per minute, which is like, wow, that doesn't seem like that much. But yeah, when I really think about it, like when I write a substantial letter to somebody, it takes me like 10, 15 minutes. So yeah, I guess that kind of feels about right. So I don't know. I've never actually like timed myself or anything. So I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of curious and see how that does. Maybe it's different if you're like print versus cursive. I don't know. I'm kind of curious. I've literally never clocked myself writing, maybe I wonder if it makes a difference, like, broader, wetter nibs, if they like write smooth or whatever, like, does that affect writing speed? I don't know, I'm kind of curious to do some tests now. I don't have time to do it, but whatever. Just curious if I'll have ever experimented with anything like that. And then I did find that like you can do shorthand notation, which is like, pretty common. I mean, like the fastest people note taking are like court stenographers and stuff. And they have special like stenography, like machines. It's a whole thing. You get trained and all that, and how to use it. But there is a big thing. This is like bigger in like the mid last century, is shorthand notation, especially if you're trying to like take dictation while somebody's speaking. There's shorthand that you can basically use like certain symbols to write, to mean basically entire words. It's pretty wild, but with shorthand, they've recorded people writing up to 350 words per minute, which is crazy. Of course, you have to know shorthand and be able to read it, but I thought that was kind of interesting. So yeah, just thought that was kind of neat. I never really thought about how much I actually write like per minute, but now I'm kind of curious where I might fall in that spectrum. So that's my fun fact for this week. Hope you enjoyed this Q&A. Have a wonderful next week. Yeah, daylight savings now. I did not enjoy waking up early on Sunday. It definitely felt early, but I definitely like it being later at like the sun. I like leaving work, especially after recording, because I record Q&A at the end of the day. I like leaving after recording here and not having it be dark. That's super nice. I can still see the sun like peeking out. It's like, yes, I'm into that. I like having dinner and then like still having time to do something outside. So now we're into that again. So yeah, anyway, that's all I got for this week. Thank you so much for watching, and right on.